enough. Well enough.
Yeah, you did you work at all this weekend, or did you have kind of a
Oh,
relaxing one?
lots. Too much work. Too much work.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Too
just a
much?
bit.
Did you work like every day?
Just about. It feels like it's been back to back to back of late.
Fair. Wow. Did you get to have any fun at all doing anything?
Not much. Not much. Nothing I can think of really. Late. Mostly just been working on some on the story stuff and some other things.
Oh, very cool. I love the picture, the cover of the cover of this. It looks really, really cool. Did you AI this thing, or how did you get that image?
I did some AI for some of the complex stuff, but then I used Photoshop for the rest. AI
Oh,
is
very
not very
cool.
good.
Yeah, but it's really fun actually. I like the sort of the way you've done it there. You know, the brewing for the title, I didn't mind at all. Brewing bad in Los Angeles. I think you get away with that. I think so long as you don't have my opinion would be the obvious Breaking Bad poster. You know, the one that where the logo is very similar. I think you can. I think you can get away with it. And Brewing Bad in Los Angeles. I just thought that was a really cool title. How do you feel about the title? Are you still negotiable with that?
Partially, I think Brewing Bad is about as good as I'm going to get. If nothing else, it'll show up when people search Breaking Bad. So,
Nice. Yeah, that's totally fair. Yeah. Right on. Well, here, let me just pull up.
so
So I went through chapter
I
one,
suppose I
went
could
through
just
the whole
call it Breaking
whole
Bad
thing
in Los
front back.
Angeles.
What's that?
I suppose I could just call it Breaking Bad in Los Angeles, but then I might get sued.
Definitely would get sued. Yeah. Yeah, I think Brewing Bad is I thought it was really, really cool actually. So I went through chapter one, top to bottom. And I just basically have one note for the whole thing. Um, but I mean, before we get into it, we can, is there anything you wanted to talk about? What do you, with this chapter, you're mainly just wanting to show her being trained? Is that the main thing?
Well, the main thing, what I really want to do is, I really wanted to set things up so that every episode, for lack of a better word, Ramona would have some key piece of information she's trying to learn as part of the BPA, and then later on,
Okay.
I show how that information is particularly useful to her. For this,
Hmm.
we're showing how learning different monsters is helpful, because later on the guys are all going to drink a bunch of concoction decoctions, which is basically distilled monster essence, monster out, and then go on a rampage. So in
Yeah.
that case, knowing what the individual monsters can do is very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And
Just gonna go through
yeah,
it.
part of my hate for chapter one right now is that I keep going back to the drawing board with it, so it's all just sporadic as hell.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. So I want to make a couple of suggestions, and then just sort of get your feedback on that. So the big note that I had with this chapter, I like a training chapter, and I like the idea that there would be important stuff for us to know. The big thing that for me made it difficult was that Ramona, it feels like she's had her mind wiped, and most of the last book didn't happen. So what I mean by that is she's asking repeatedly. First of all, she comes across largely as weirdly indifferent to this training, asking questions about why it's necessary when literally everybody who's read the previous book knows the answer to that question, why it's important, and so would she. And she comes across as very passive. So in other words, this feel that the responses Ramona's giving Julius in this chapter feels like the response that she would have given to Julius back before they even went on the mission to the northern outpost. At the end of you brought the last book to such a beautiful, both dramatic and emotional high point where they had really been through a lot together. And here's what a producer or a publisher would definitely expect, is that it looked like you by design were crystallizing, galvanizing the relationship between Ramona and Julius in all of the events of the previous chapters, so that while a little banter, sort of like seasoning in a meal would be nice. um, the audience assumes by this point, I would, and I think most publishers would assume that the next book is not going to reintroduce the idea of them being at odds with each other and her calling him a cock at the end and all that stuff. That's the way she would have behaved like 10 chapters ago in the previous book. So what it looks like has happened is like all of the hard emotional work and everything else that's happened between Julius and Ramona.
Mm-hmm.
What is that doing? That it's all been erased, and we've gone back to the Ramona from, why is this doing this, from that part of that story. She's asking questions that everybody's like, what? Like, she's just repeatedly asking questions. I don't get this. Why are we doing this? Why is this necessary? Come on, Ramona, you know why. Unless you've literally had your memory erased, you can't possibly not know why this training is important. And the resistance to Julius also makes no sense. And there was, so she just seems like a 15-year-old version of the person that we know she's not anymore. So she comes off at the end of that last book as someone who, wow, like she's definitely grown and changed. And oh, no, she didn't, because now she's right back to who she was, and I don't understand why. So I'm going to be honest, the one thing I would suggest is that if it was me, I would go through this chapter and say, okay, what is the key information that we need to reveal?
Just delete it.
And make a list of.
Go to the other one then. The other one.
Yeah. So that's perfect. So let me finish here with this though. Because what would be valuable to me, and it's not that it's bad, it's that what I was looking for and what I thought was going to kind of happen is, and so this is what I'll be looking at when I read the next chapter, is that I would encourage you to go the exact opposite direction with this chapter, and rather than show 12 or 10 or 11 pages of sort of this bickering relationship as she's being trained. So I'll see what you did with the other one. I want to see her engaged. I want to see the Ramona you ended the last book with, and kind of what would be useful to me getting into this book. The thing that would hook me into watching this, or reading this, I should say, isn't going back obviously to who she was in the past, but let them talk about what happened, like recap the events of the last book, show us where they're at their evolving relationship, fill in the blanks of what's happened since the last book, talk about the El Noon and any information Ramona might need about that. Tell us what the updated mission of the BPA might be in light of what happened in the previous book. Let us know what's coming next. That's the low-hanging fruit. Any one of those things, but all of them even better, that's what I'm assuming the reader would go into the next book wanting to get more information on. That to me would be useful, plus whatever little bits of training. Because I think you could do that. Like you could, like, for example, so this is what I'll be looking at in the other chapter version is, for example, if you're going to say, okay, we just fought these fucking El Noon, Ramona desperately need to be brought up to speed on anything else new. Has the BPA been notified? Where's Julius at in his thinking? If they got any injuries that have been sustained, like the human stuff. And then while they're training, that would be sort of the operative way. You can kind of kill two birds with one stone. Okay, so this is the thing we just learned about, from this last experience. So this is why this training is important, and then get into that. So then what we get is a chapter of setting up this book and telling us what we can expect without giving away everything. So because this was 12 pages, I did just read this one. So I think it was a good sort of crack. You don't know unless you try. She just came across as I didn't buy her because she was not at all the same Ramona that I left in the last book. She was the old Ramona, which didn't make sense. Plus I didn't have any idea what was coming. So it was a lot of talk, kind of an exploration of this fighting technique will deal with this problem. This fighting technique will deal with that problem. I kind of wanted to get their emotional temperature. I wanted to get a sense of how are they? Who are they now? What does the BPA know? So this would be this section here, right at the very top of this one, where it says recommendation. Have this, I would pull all kinds of stuff from this, and I can put this as a note in your email as well. So no criticism at all of the hard work. I mean, this is obviously
put the hard work. I basically just wanted to toss that to you and say, what's the problem? What am I screwing up in this?
Okay, totally fair. And that if you were having trouble, if you were sort of feeling like you kept going back to chapter one and kind of grinding your gears, it could just simply be that you were trying to fit a sort of a square hole into a circle, or a square peg into a circle hole, and it wasn't fitting. I've done that too. I've had chapters where I just went in a direction that that might not have worked. So I haven't read the other chapter, of course, because that one took my time, my 30 minutes. But I'm just going to look at the beginning of this chapter.
Yeah, it's
I'm
nothing
going to
new.
see
It's
if it starts
basically
to give me.
Julius's rant from the original PCF script. It's
Okay.
Julius's rant contextualized. Basically, Julius and Ramona arrive at. I'm still not 100% decided, but Area 51, which is the BPA's base of operations. They go down
Mm-hmm.
into like the Men in Black buildings underneath, and then Julius goes on a bit of a rant.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like I'm looking at it here, and it looks like still sort of that weird relationship between Ramona and Julius by the things she's saying to him and to Dick.
What
So I'll
relationship do
read
you
through this.
expect them to have at this point?
Well, I don't the way I mean it's your story, but to me, I think anybody if people have read the first book and have seen the evolution of the relationship between them, seen what they've gone through together, see how often they've gone to bat for each other, see how they've risked their lives for each other repeatedly back and forth, been to hell and back. I mean, that's the genius of, I'm gonna be honest, that's the genius of your first book is that it looks like you're quite intentionally setting up a relationship. Now, it might have been a happy accident. You'll be like, I didn't mean to do that, but you definitely did that. So what you did is you brought them to this beautiful place where she's had to learn on the fly how to be a BPA agent. He's resented her being there, but also clearly has sort of an almost fatherly or collegial respect for her and trying to help her. And then she's come along and helped him. It's like, wow, if I'm Julius, I went from thinking this girl was a fifth wheel that I wanted to get rid of to holy shit, this is a really valuable asset to my team who also just saved my life and whose life I saved. And God, I realize now I can't be without her. And the dialogue even was sort of going in that direction. So their dialogue also evened out over time. So by the beginning of the relationship, it was fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. And by the end of the relationship, it's not like they were in love or like they were best friends and would never have an argument again, but they clearly had achieved some level of simpatico, some level of peer, being peers and so on. So the relationship I see them going into the next story with is not one where they necessarily always only ever get along and never disagree. I want to see that. I want to see some spice from these guys. But she hates Julia so much in both versions of the chapters that you give that is like I just don't see any connection between these people. I feel like we've gone back in time to some previous moment. This isn't following the last story. This is like several weeks back or something like that. So I don't want to be overly prescriptive about. I definitely don't want to create the relationship for you, but these two people feel like they're people who are like, okay, still lots to learn. Like if it was me, I'd write a list. Okay, before I wrote a single thing, and sometimes we writers do that. We're such a hurry to write the next chapter, and you of course you're on a deadline, so you feel that heat to have to write the chapter. This is normally where I and any kind of producer would say, full stop, pause, stop writing. Let's spend some time getting to know these characters. Who are they now? That's not for me to answer. That's for you to answer ultimately. And where their relationship is at, it looks like you may not have taken the time to pause after the last book to stop, assess the lay of the land. Who are these people now? What's their relationship? Who would they logically be going into the next story? I don't know the total answer to that, but I do know that the Julius and Ramona relationship I'm seeing here feels like about the last 10 chapters of the previous book didn't happen.
Hmm.
So, if that makes sense. Think of you and me. Like if you and me were like, him and her, and we'd been through what they're pick your best friend or whatever, who would you logically be with that person? You wouldn't probably go back to this like her. There's two things at play right now with the chapters that I'm seeing. One is that her way of relating to Julius makes no sense given what they've been through, but her whole way of relating to training doesn't make any sense as well. Like Ramona, remember when you just about died 18,000 times in the previous book and you were exposed to one new bizarre creature after another? The message clearly was, Ramona, anything could happen. Nothing should surprise you. Whatever Julius wants to teach you, you should be open and completely willing to take. And there should be no questions about it. Not because you're afraid to ask questions, but because you just went through hell, you get it. So to me, Ramona would be dragging Julius along, not the other way around. Like Ramona would be like, let's go, let's get trained. And he would be like, whoa, hang on, one thing at a time. She goes, no, we need to get trained now. That's the Ramona that I was expecting, was somebody who would be dragging him along, not going, do we really have to train? Why are we doing this? And like that doesn't make any sense, that Ramona would be doing that after what they've just been through.
So maybe a Monsters
So I might
Inc. training montage instead. Because
so long as, yeah, that could work, just so long as we're also my suggestion would be on those recommendations, just so long as we're also getting, again, this kind of information. This is your money shot. I want to know, where's the relationship at, what's happened since the last book, like give us a sense of how much time has passed, even if it's just like the very next day.
It is very much the next day.
Then okay, that's perfect. Then this conversation makes even less sense.
Relatively speaking, it's the next day.
Yeah. If it was within a year, it wouldn't make sense because of what they've been through. So I would say that I want to, if there's new things to, what is there new to learn about the Al Noon? Like I would be making a list. I would stop, if it was me, I would put a pause on writing and I would say, okay, where's Ramona's head at now? What does she know? What doesn't she know? What does she need to be made aware of? What does Julius know? What new understandings does he have? How is his
training plan? I've already got.
Okay, but this is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to attach each one to an episode, like each lesson.
Okay, cool. So that's one thing. The training plan is a different thing than what I'm talking about, though. What I'm talking about is totally apart from training. Where is Julius at? Where is Ramona at in their thinking, in their understanding, in their relationship, based on everything that happened before? And I would get really I would just make lists, and it's not time wasted at all. Like I would say, I would, if it was me, I would kind of force myself to say, nothing is more important right now than pausing and making sure I clearly understand who my characters should be. Because right now, they're not behaving like people who just went through what they went through. They're behaving like people who are at each other's throats because, well, I don't know why, because it just doesn't make any sense that they would be at each other like this. And it definitely doesn't make sense that she would be so resistant to training that's so obviously necessary for herself and for what may come. She doesn't
know if it's necessary. Also, she's a bit of a brute. It's like that was at least her initial, like, she starts up as a brute but becomes a much more finessed fighter as time goes on.
Okay, and that might speak to her skill level, but her attitude, her personality is quite
it doesn't matter,
quite
because I already deleted all this and I'm already replacing it with basically a training montage. Well, first off, introduction to the BPA. Now, quick question: should I do this in some random place in Texas, Area 51, or somewhere on like the Alien Road? I like Area 51 because it's official. It already exists. It fits the timeline pretty well. So,
your choice. Yeah, I don't really have a strong feeling. So whatever you
basically, the team goes to Area 51. Julius introduces her to the whole place. They go to the library. Julius tells her he needs to go get debriefed with Daphne and leaves her there, the giant textbook full of monsters, and just tells her to enjoy reading it. It's going to be on a test later. And then we cut to Julius, Daphne, and Baker all arguing as Julius dumps an Al Noon corpse on them. Al Noon, blah, 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 blah. And then training montage sort of thing with studying the monsters, because that's first up on the training index.
Okay. No, I would love to.
And then they get sent off to Los Angeles to fight monsters.
Sure.
For that information, I think is immediately useful. Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, that's okay. No, and that's good. So everything you just described is good on a plot level, but what I was talking about is on a character level, and I think both are equally important. So I like where you're going with the plot, and plot is always where your greatest strength, I think, is always in what happens. The area where I think the greatest growth needs to happen, certainly for you as a writer generally, and you've absolutely evolved in this area, but certainly with this chapter, however this book starts, is I'm interested in seeing a training sequence. I'm interested in seeing an Al Noon dumped on Baker. I love that, by the way. Please do that. I love everything about what you just described on a plot level. I love that. But what I really care about, and I think this is what will differentiate your writing from everybody else who rushedly puts stuff up on Royal Road because they're on a time crunch, and you can tell by the right by what I've started going through some of the books, and I can tell these writers, a lot of them are just trying desperately to get stuff put up there. And I'm like, oh my God, you haven't thought about character or what happens or why it's happening or what. You're just hoping that having a bunch of stuff happening is going to be enough to make a reader read it. And I'm like, but you're not going to get a fan base you're looking for.
To a certain extent, it's not inaccurate. I've seen plenty of. I know a few good stories on Royal Road. I'll send you some of them. Actually, no. Wait,
Yeah, and I don't.
all the good ones I
Yeah,
just
and I don't mean they're.
realized are actually on Amazon and taken off Royal
Oh,
Road.
cool.
So might be a little
Yeah, and I'm
harder.
not meaning to say that I think that all the stuff I've read is bad. It's not about being good or bad. What it just looks like is it looks like people who are in a rush to get a plot out and haven't spent time. Some of them, a lot of them actually, haven't spent enough time to make me care about the characters. This is the differentiator. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but nobody gives a shit about cool things happening after a certain point. That will work for people up to a certain point, but if the characters aren't making sense and if they're not connecting, if they're not behaving in a way that I would behave if I'd been through that, like how would you, if you were Ramona or Julius, like close everything out in your mind and think about what you've put them through? Where would they be at emotionally? Where would they be at physically? Where would they be at in their relationship with each other? Julius went into this whole mission that they just went on, certain that Ramona was a waste of skin he couldn't get rid of quick enough, and was just dying to, like, didn't wish her any harm, but he just thought, you're just going to screw this whole thing up. And she totally proved him wrong. And while she was proving him wrong, they were discovering all this new stuff about the El Noon. You want to talk about an information download for Julius? Like, his whole worldview changed. It had to have. If it didn't, I don't buy him. Because this guy went into that whole thing that they went through thinking he knew what to expect. They were going to go in, they were going to come out. This Ramona is in my way. Jesus, I wish I could get rid of her. Fine, whatever, we'll bring her along, but we're going to go in, we're going to do this thing, we're going to get out. Nothing went the way Julius thought it was going to go. Nothing. She totally surprised him. The El Noon completely blew his mind. He realized they got a bigger problem than they could ever have imagined. They got caught. They barely escaped. She saved his life, and they barely got out alive. So Julius, I don't care how tough and old and hardened he is, there's no way this guy, if he's got any humanity at all, hasn't just had his whole. He's been completely reprogrammed by what's happened, and it's a good thing. So with that in mind, I see him going into I see a chapter starting with Julius for the first time ever. Julius, who always is ready to go, has an answer for things. I see this chapter starting with him staring at the floor. I'm not saying you should start that way, but I'm saying like what's going on? And then like I can say this was a movie. I would like show him just staring at the wall, knock on the door. Baker comes in, goes, so how did everything go? How did everything go? How about this? Throws the El Noon at him. You didn't tell us what was like, and then there's the whole conversation between Julius and Baker and whatever it could be there, and then you go to training, like you suggested, which I love. Now he goes to train. She like, and Ramona's like, so how did that meeting go? The reason she wasn't in the meeting, even though she was
She's
there.
napping. I just realized.
Perfect.
I just realized she's basically been awake for 72 plus hours.
Yeah. Sorry for that. And then I love the idea that, like, make Baker the bet rather than having Julius and Ramona pissed off at each other and her going, why are we having this training, you cock, and all that stuff like that. Make Baker the bet. He's just come back from a meeting with Baker. Meanwhile, he's still trying to deal with and process. I don't care how super duper he is. He can still experience trauma. So he's dealing with all of that. And she says, so how did that go? What's going on? What are we doing next? Like, she's the young apprentice still trying to figure out what's going on. It says, we got to go to training. Training for what? Our work is just beginning. And then you go into it and they can keep talking about, now we got a chapter, because now these two are
I can't hear you. You're cutting out.
allies. Ramona and Julius, which
Nico.
is exactly what you set them up to be in the last book. And now you know, they carry on with, okay, what's the mission?